Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here at LeadDev Berlin 2024. So many inspiring talks, I cannot believe it. So I'm Ayelen Chavez, Director of Engineering at TagFix, and today I'll share a transformative journey that began in my previous role as Head of Engineering of the Growth Pillar at OLX Group. I'll walk you through how we turn a critical challenge into an opportunity when traditional call support wasn't an option. You learn how we scale on-call across multiple teams, reduce costs, and foster a culture of collaboration. I'll share practical strategies, lessons learned, and with some luck, inspire you to drive similar change in your own organizations. So let's dive into how this revolution brought our teams closer and made our services stronger. But first, I want to ask you, all of you here, who has been part or is part of on-call rotations? Please, raise your hands. I see. Thank you. So if so, you know how critical it is to get this right. Let's talk about what works for us. First, 2 minutes of self-promotion. I come originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I moved here to Berlin with my partner around 9 years ago. We have 2 small kids, and I have a master's degree in computer science from the University of Buenos Aires. Almost 20 years or 2 decades in the tech industry. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to tell you a story about my previous role at OLX. But these days, I'm working at TagFix. So yeah, I work with Nikita, and I know that there are some other colleagues that are supporting me, so thank you for that. I cannot be more grateful. So before we dive in, I ask you to think about your own on-call processes. Do they actually foster collaboration and ownership, or do they burn out your teams? I'll walk you through the challenge we faced, our solution, and its incredible impact. Finally, I'll address some common objections you may find if you take a similar path in your organizations. By the end of this talk, you will have a roadmap how to revolutionize your own on-call processes. So let's get started. At OLX, within the growth pillar, I led a team of over 60 individuals across 6 product teams, spanning multiple countries. We were responsible for driving growth across more than 20 brands in over 30 countries. It was a diverse and complicated, so diverse and complex landscape, which made the story I'm about to share with you even more impactful. As shown in this extract from our org chart, the Site Reliability Engineering Team, or SRE, they were supporting the product organization, and they handle infrastructure and operations. However, the SRE team was independent, supporting the product organization with a dotted line reporting structure. We thought we had a stable setup with SRE support for after-hour alerts. But can you imagine what happens when the backbone of your support is suddenly pulled away? That's exactly what we faced. Our wake-up call came suddenly. Our product teams were 100% focused on delivering features when the SRE team will draw support, on-call support, for our services overnight. It turned out they were overwhelmed by understaffing and increased scope. It felt like this. Like many companies post-COVID and during times of global uncertainty, the SRE team was facing challenges. Long interview processes, organizational shifts, hiring freezes, budget cuts, you name it. These difficulties led the SRE team stepping back from their supporting role and leaving us to figure our way forward. When this decision was made, we realized that because we had the SRE support, we were rarely involved into critical reliability processes. This situation exposed several challenges, several gaps in our teams. The 4 most important being that we had little to no involvement in monitoring and alerting setups. Second, our documentation was either missing or severely outdated. Third, we had no culture of conducting postmortems after incidents. And fourth, most importantly, our teams had limited visibility of what was truly happening with their services during after-hour alerts. This wasn't a technical problem. It was a cultural one. So faced with this challenge, we created a common on-call rotation across 4 of our 6 teams. Why 4? The other 2, chat and PWA team, they were owners of critical services, so they still had either SRE or their own on-call rotation after hours. So by the way, they actually were part of the benefits that we reached with these new processes that we put in place. Our solution then was a shared on-call rotation, 1 engineer and the engineering manager of the 4 teams that I mentioned before, and myself, making a total of 9 people. Instead of having 4 people on call on a given day, so 1 for each 4 teams, we will have only 1. So we cut costs roughly by 75%. You did the math, right? So can you imagine reducing your on-call cost as much? At this point, we had a clear strategy, but we needed the buy-in from leadership to move forward. We didn't have real data yet. We had a vision, one that involved, as I said, cutting costs by 75%, improving service quality, and setting an example for the rest of the organization. When I went to finance and the VP of engineering back then, I presented this as achievable predictions. The cost reduction was a clear cut because we were consolidating teams and rotations. But the other benefits, they were promises. We needed to work really, really hard to fulfill. I'll come back to whether or not we hit those targets later in my presentation, but this was our way to secure the budget that we needed to make all this work. So with the green light to proceed, we set about building the infrastructure to support our new on-call strategy. We streamlined everything with key tools. PagerDuty, a software as a service incident management platform for alerting, Slack for real-time communication, a Python script I wrote back then to connect to PagerDuty and generate weekly alert summaries. We had Confluence pages to host these summaries and other crucial documentation, Jira ticketing system to track incidents and their follow-up tasks, and a simple generic runbook to guide on-call engineers while handling alerts. And finally, we put 2 new processes in place. First, we introduced postmortems meetings. So after incidents, to understand their root cause and turn them into learning opportunities. This helped prevent us from future incidents from happening, but also improve system reliability by fostering a blameless and transparent culture. We didn't have that before. And second, we held weekly catch-ups with the on-call team based on the alert summaries that I mentioned before. So this will allow us to systematically review system monitoring, alerting, our evolving processes, and we will drive continuous improvement regardless of whether there was an incident that week or not. These interconnected tools and processes form the backbone of our new strategy, ensuring that everyone had the support they needed to handle on-call duties effectively. So what did a typical day on-call look like, especially when we were still figuring things out? If I receive an alert, I will open PagerDuty to know which is the service that was affected. And I'm going to open the generic runbook I mentioned before, ideally moving to the specific team runbook. For example, if the alert was triggered by the user accounts API, then the team runbook would ideally guide me how to mitigate the issue. But let's be honest, sometimes things didn't go as smoothly. If I was left with no useful runbook, and I knew that this wasn't a false alert, then I would escalate internally to a person in the user accounts team that was part of our common on-call rotation. So this person I know, he or she, they weren't actually on call, but they were part of our internal escalation policy.
I really hope you're enjoying this video. Do you know LeadDev offers way more than this?
I'm a fan of the LeadDev newsletter. I find really practical knowledge about leadership.
Then I was like, oh, there is this big community here doing all of these content, so let me figure out a little more, let me dig in a little, what do you have?
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
If we decide that the root cause of the incident was actually caused, for example, by our monolith backend, then we will escalate further to the SRE team that were still supporting platforms outside of working hours. Now, suppose that we resolve the issue, then we will schedule the postmortem I mentioned before to review what actually happened, what went wrong, and the follow-up tasks and the incident will be tracked in Jira for accountability. At the end of the week, we will generate the weekly incident report using the Python script I mentioned, hosted in Confluence, and then we will hold this meeting with the on-call team to review potential improvements and discuss next steps. And we use, of course, Slack through the whole process for real-time communication. So what happened next was truly remarkable. Imagine knowing your service could wake up a close colleague. Wouldn't that actually motivate you to swiftly address issues and improve alerting and runbooks? This approach fostered a vibrant culture of accountability, knowledge sharing, and continuous improvements across the teams. Our collective efforts didn't just reduce on-call burdens. They brought us closer together as a team, united by the shared responsibility. So I want to share a story with you. One of my first nights on call, I was waken up by a 3 a.m. alert about high CPU usage in one of our user communication servers. The alert quickly auto-resolved. It turned out to be a harmless spike caused by a routinely shove with the alert set up using incorrect thresholds. So, yeah, the normal one. So it had been waking up people for months, unnecessary for months. So this experience highlighted the need to clean up obsolete alerts. Over time, we reduced disruptions and false positives, cutting off hours alerts by up to 80% for some of our services. As I mentioned before, the cost saving was substantial, 75% reduction. But most importantly, we saw a boost in employee satisfaction as measured by our internal engagement tool, Office Vibe, improving by 5% in the first month and an additional 3% in the following month. These metrics demonstrate how we were able to balance efficiency, cost savings, and team morale. So who wouldn't want these results in their teams? So now, let's talk about the future. But I have another question to you here. How many of you actively use SLAs, SLIs, and SLOs within your organizations? Please, raise your hands. OK, thank you. So then let's break down these terms for anyone either unfamiliar or needing a quick reminder. SLAs, or service level agreements, are promises we make our customers about service performance. Think about 99.9% uptime. While SLIs, or service level indicators, measure how well our service performed, ideally showing how our customers experience them. Examples include error rate, latency, and availability. SLOs, or service level objectives, are internal goals we set to meet those agreements. For example, you might aim for 95% of all your API requests to be completed in under 200 milliseconds. Finally, and this one is important, error budget is the amount of failure we can tolerate before affecting our objectives and stopping feature development to focus on reliability. Though they may sound technical, these are simple concepts that help balance service reliability with how quick we deliver new features. So at OLX, we began laying the groundwork for SLAs, SLIs, and SLOs, though it was still a work in progress when I left. Our plan roadmap starts with identifying the most critical services, so those whose failure will impact directly our users. Once identified, we define the key indicators, or SLIs, to measure their performance. Third stage, we'll set specific objectives, or SLOs, for these metrics. So these targets should be realistic, but also drive continuous improvement. Finally, we'll formalize everything by implementing service level agreements or SLAs with our stakeholders to align on performance goals and ensure reliability, allowing teams to innovate safely. So, I know my story is full of positive outcomes, and you may be thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to implement any of these in my team, let alone my organization. So let's address some common objections you may have or you may face if you decide to take a similar path. Let's bust 3 common myths. Myth number 1. A generic team cannot handle critical systems they didn't build or own. Busted. I really like saying busted. I'm sorry. So our experience showed that with proper documentation and a culture of knowledge sharing, it's not only possible, but it's beneficial. The key is fostering a learning environment where teams are eager to expand their knowledge. Myth number 2, we lose specialized knowledge. Busted. Yes, I know. On the contrary, this approach encourages broader knowledge sharing among teams. Instead of having knowledge silos, we created a network of shared expertise. Last but not least, and this one is really important, it's too risky to change our current strategy. Why to change it? Busted. Yay. The bigger risk is in not adapting. By taking calculated risk and iterating, we greatly improve both reliability and employee satisfaction. You might mitigate the risk of change by testing new approaches in less critical services or during working hours, pairing experienced on-call engineers with more junior ones, for example, and tracking simple metrics such as error rate. Be sure to monitor those metrics so you can act before you reach critical thresholds. So enough of me saying busted, but I really enjoy that. So as we conclude, let's reflect on our journey. It began by losing the SRE support overnight, forcing us to rethink our on-call management. This challenge pushed us to revolutionize our approach. We implemented a common on-call strategy across teams, reducing costs and distributing responsibility. This sparked a cultural shift, cultivating ownership, collaboration, and shared accountability. The results were remarkable. 80% fewer after-hours alerts, 75% cost reductions, and even increased team satisfaction. For the future, we will implement SLAs, SLIs, and SLOs to balance reliability and innovation. This revolution transformed how we work together, showing that when challenged, we can create positive change throughout our organization. So as a wrap-up, my message to you is simple. Join the on-call revolution. If your team faces similar challenges, don't settle. Rethink your processes and drive real change. Use what you've learned today, for example, to start your own revolution in ownership and collaboration. So here is my last question to you. Who's ready to join the revolution? Raise your hands if you're inspired to make real change today. Yay! Thank you.